Hi and welcome to another video about Python functions. Previously, we learned what a function is. In this video, we'll make our functions a bit more useful, meaning making use of parameters and make the functions return something to us. Just to understand what a parameter is, how I would describe it is that a parameter is a value that a function requires as input whenever you call that function. Regarding what it returns, the function we created in the previous video didn't return anything, but functions usually, but not necessarily, return some form of value. For instance, the input function we have used a lot takes input from the terminal and returns that value as a string. Before we continue, if you find my videos interesting and want to learn more about Python, serverless, and AWS, please consider subscribing to my channel and smash that bell icon to get notified when I publish more content. Now to today's example. Let's say you have a bird object and you want to validate every attribute in that object. Then it can be useful to have a function that can do that validation for you. At the top of my new Python file, I have a bird object with some attributes. Another nice thing about functions is that you can reuse them. So let's say we'll later create a list of bird objects. Then we can reuse that validation function to validate every bird object in that list. And that's exactly what we are going to do in this video. Okay, so how I want to do this is to create two functions. One to validate a single bird attribute, and another to use that function to validate a complete bird object with every attribute. First, let's create the function that can validate a single attribute. I'll call mine validAttribute, and I want to give that function one parameter. I'll call that parameter bird_attribute. Now, whenever I call this function, it's required that I also provide some value for that parameter. So, how do we validate the bird attribute? Well, I want to make sure that the value is not none, and that the value is not an empty string. Now we also must figure out what to do in the event that a bird attribute is none or an empty string. I think I just want to return false, since the method is called validAttribute. And then return true if none of these are the case. We now have a function that can validate a single bird attribute by returning true or false if it's valid or not. Let's now write another function that can make use of the function we just created to validate all the bird attributes. I'll start by defining a function called validateBird, and I want this function to take in one parameter, namely a bird object. Just as a side note, you can define a required type, like string or boolean, when adding a function parameter. But for simplicity's sake, I'll not do that now. Inside our new function, let's write some code. Since there are 3 parameters in our bird object, we can just write a single if statement where we require the response from our first function to be true for every attribute. So just write an if statement and then call the validAttribute function for the bird ID and then all the other fields. Now, inside this if statement, we can return a string like this. Valid bird object. And then also the bird object itself. And outside the if statement, we can write a return statement with a string value like this. Invalid bird object, and then the bird object itself again. Now, whenever we call this function, we will get a string in return that is either one of the two we just wrote. Lastly, we must call this function. So let's do that. I'll store the response in a variable called response, and then call the function with a bird object like this. Let's go over to the terminal and run our application. Nice, it worked! Now if we set the value of the ID to an empty string, we should get invalid bird. So let's just do that and run the code again. Superb, just as intended. Earlier I talked about a list of bird objects and how we can reuse this function for other purposes. So let's do that. I want to iterate over a list of birds and call the validate bird function for each of them. I'll just copy and paste a list I have created beforehand in here. Now we should just write a for loop to iterate over the list and then print the response we get from every call to our new function. Would you look at that? One bird had an empty string as the name, and the albatross had the canFly attribute set to none. We have now written two functions that can take some input as a parameter and return something. In the next video, we will learn about Python modules and how they can be really useful when we have a lot of code that we want to reuse in different applications. If you have any questions, just leave a comment, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Until next time, happy coding!